Well, hello there, True Health Seeker. Welcome to another wonderful episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Before we get started, I have some quick news to share with you. If you have been thinking about becoming a certified health coach, if you're interested both for your own personal growth and health, and also interested in possibly transforming your career path into helping other people gain their true health, then definitely check out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And right now, there is a special going on. They're offering the first 30 people to join using the special promotion for the Memorial Day sale. It's $1,000 off, a brand new tablet, a $200 Amazon gift card. If you don't want the tablet, you get an additional $700 off your tuition. You also receive full tuition to their Launch Your Dreams book course, which is just about $1,000 value. You also receive their full tuition for their coaching mastery course. These are their advanced courses that you take beyond your health coach training program with them. That's also about $1,000 value. And there are several other amazing goodies that they include in this package. So if you've been on the fence, if you've been thinking about becoming a health coach, know that the Institute for Integrative Nutrition now has two programs to certify you to become a health coach. One is a 12-month program. This is the one they've been doing for many years. And this month they're launching. So it's starting this month, the end of this month. So you want to join now for that. Their accelerated 6-month program. What that looks like is if you have 20 minutes a day that you could dedicate to this, and know that you could be commuting. So basically, if you have enough time to listen to my show, then you have absolutely enough time to complete the IIN, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition's Health Coach Training Program. It would take you about, if you're doing the six-month program, you'd want to dedicate about 40 minutes a day, 5 days a week, to your studies, and you can do that while commuting. If you commute between 20 and 40 minutes a day, well, then that's all the time you need to complete your training program, because they also give you the slides for the presentations you can look at before or after you've listened to the videos. And then a lot of their coursework is also audios. So I know a lot of people think to themselves, I'd love to do this program. I'd love to become a health coach, but I don't think I have enough time. Well, Joshua Rosenthal, the creator of this program, designed it so that busy working moms or busy stay-at-home moms could do it. And so if they can do it during nap time or in the evenings or while they're doing their laundry, if they can complete all the coursework during their busy schedule, then anyone can. And that's really the exciting aspect of the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. They designed it for adults who have busy lives. And so you can definitely do it. Don't worry about the timing. Now, if you're worried about the price, well, this gives you a great discount on top of they already have a payment plan. And I opted to do the payment plan. I completed their course last year, and it really was life-changing. I highly recommend it. I've said this before. I would have done it for the personal growth alone. It was really worth it for me. And they made it very affordable because they have a payment plan. So definitely check it out. You could just Google Institute for Integrative Nutrition or just Google IIN and give them a call. Make sure you mention the Learn True Health podcast or my name, Ashley James, so that you get this special. If you have any questions at all, if you want to even chat with me, I can answer your questions about my experience with their program. I'd love to help you. I'd love to also mentor you if you choose to go through with this program. I've mentored several of the listeners of our podcast who have gone on to join IIN and become health coaches. Anything I can do to support you in your success, I really believe that the world right now needs more health coaches. Please feel free to email me, ashley@learntruehealth.com. Excellent. Well, enjoy today's interview. It is a wonderful interview, and I just love today's guest. He doesn't try to be inspirational, but he ends up being very inspirational. And you're just going to feel however you feel right now, you're going to feel a whole lot better after hearing today's interview. Enjoy. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 260. Well, I am so excited for today's guest. We have with us an absolutely amazing man, Aaron Keith Hawkins. Well, I'm just going to jump right into welcoming you to the show because your bio, when you share what you've done and what you've accomplished and who you are today and what you do now, I think we'll all discover exactly why. I just want you to explain it because I love what you do. And this is one of those feel-good episodes, which is so nice because we cover some heavy topics on this show. You know, there are times, we cover some heavy topics, and I love to have the feel-good, inspirational, motivational kind of episodes once in a while to break it up. So this is the happy, feel-good. I'm going to probably release this on a Friday just because, or maybe a Monday because we need that, right? We need to pick me up. So anyway, you'll feel like a Friday on a Monday, basically. I'll make sure, I'll release it on a Monday. We'll feel like a Friday. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Now you kind of propped me up now, so I got to go to work. I was relaxed. Now everybody's expecting, who is this guy?
Right.
But no, honestly, I'm so grateful to be here and be able to hang out with you and talk with everybody about a few things. So very grateful to you. Thank you.
Cool. Well, first of all, your website's aaronkeithhawkins.com. The link to that, of course, is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast at learntrailhealth.com. And your podcast is called Unbreakable Success.
Yes.
Which is really neat. How did you decide to name it that when you were, I know the pain of trying to figure out what to name your podcast. It's like what to name your child. So how did you come up with Unbreakable Success as the name for your podcast?
Well, that was round 2. I was actually a rebrand. I started podcasting just a couple of years ago, back in 2015. And originally the name of my show was Best Life of Your Life. And I can't even tell you why I named it that initially. I just knew I wanted to immediately capture the idea of, just helping people live a better life. And I was really young in the idea of podcasting. I didn't even know what I wanted to be doing with the show completely. But I knew it was going to be fun and I was going to have some good guests. And I took a hiatus from podcasting for a few months, decided after talking to a few people that I know and trust when it comes to business and branding. And I said, and I gave them the name of the show I was thinking about was Unbreakable Success. I'm like, what do you think? And they said, well, why do you want to name it that? So my explanation was the work that I do, when people ask me why I do this coaching and this, most people would call it motivational speaking and that type of stuff. I said the reason I do it is because most people start out with good intentions, whether it's getting into a relationship, starting a business. In my experience, and as crazy as it sounds, because I've spent over 2 decades as a police officer as well, most people really have good intentions. But inevitably, when people are struggling, something comes along to break those intentions. And the goal of my coaching is, I don't look at coaching and supporting people, and even the keynotes and stuff that I do, as solving a problem as much as I look at it as preparing them so that when the problems come, because they are coming, nobody gets out of it. When those problems come, they're prepared for it, and those problems don't break them down because they've already mentally and physically prepared themselves that life is going to hit you in the face from time to time, and either you're mentally prepared for it and you have a strategy to deal with it, or you're not prepared and you wind up, knocked to your knees. So that was the gist of the whole Unbreakable, title. And
I love how you describe that because I think a lot of people, like in their heart, they have that glimmer of hope and they really want to succeed at, I'm going to use like weight loss as an example, but there's so many other health goals we can have. Yeah. And then we just start thinking about it. Like, okay, let's say it's a marathon. I want to run a marathon. And then we start thinking about it. And let's say I'm not a very, exercise oriented person. And I really want to do this like end goal in mind. And then what comes up in my head is that fear of the breakdowns, because what we do is we hold our past against us.
Sure.
And so it's like, oh, well, all those times we've actually we kind of have a bad relationship with ourselves. Over time, we lose trust with ourselves because we set goals and we don't achieve them. And then we go, well, look, There's all
Yeah.
these times in my past when I haven't achieved my goal. And so
Yeah.
I don't even want to like put myself out there and then get hurt again by myself, like get sort of like a being in a bad relationship with ourselves. And so this
Yes.
idea of unbreakable success is like, yeah, whatever that goal is, whether it's weight loss, whether it's building muscle, maybe that person wants to build healthy muscle, whether it's
Yep.
endurance and fitness, or a career, or a family, maybe they want to build a family, or find a partner, whatever those goals are. Those are kind of big mountains.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
and so I love that you help them get out of their head, stop holding their past against them,
Yeah.
and then start like being logical about it. Like it sounds like kind of like adulting, this
Yeah.
concept of like, because I think a lot of us are children in that we're still kind of like
Oh, we're
wanting our
kids.
parents to come save us.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I remember growing up, my mom would do everything for us. Like my mom
Yeah.
was like the executive function of our entire family. She would book our dental appointments, our
Yep.
hair appointments. She would buy our clothing. And I remember as a 20-year-old, like not like I took it so for granted. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, how I don't
Yeah.
remember the last time I went to the dentist because I was so used to my entire life my mom just doing it for us. And
Yep.
there was no transition. There was no like handover of the executive function. It's kind of like, okay, you're an adult, go do it. Go be adult.
Yeah. It's
And
like you're out there flapping.
right, exactly. And so and then when it comes to like these really big things we'll want to accomplish, let alone the day-to-day stuff,
Sure.
sometimes we're left without resources. And so I love this idea that you're going, okay, I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to help you plan out the things that may be in your blind spots so that you're not going to break, like you said, break down
Yeah.
when the inevitable happens. That's
Yeah.
really cool. Well, how did you come about to this? Like, how did you become an expert at this? Because I know some people might go, "Oh, motivational speaker, that's so cliche." But really,
Yeah.
I mean, you have a lot of experience behind what you do, including a degree. And I had no idea that you could go to school, that you go to university and major in leadership and professional coaching. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. It's it's funny. You mentioned the cliche of being a motivational speaker, and it's very often when I start any speech or presentation, I always tell people that uh, they're probably going to want my money back because I'm not a motivational speaker. Because I just don't like to. I said I'm not. I'm telling you right now. I didn't tell the event planner this, but I'm not an emotional. I'm not a motivational speaker. I don't think of myself that way. And don't get me wrong. I truly understand like motivation's a real thing, but I don't think motivation wins in the long run.
Mm.
I think of it as identity, because you can get like motivation works when you're feeling motivated, and that's pretty much the only time it works. And it could be because you read a really good quote, you saw a really great movie, um, you're with a bunch of friends and you're all hyped up to win the game, like in high school or college. But life isn't like, look, you're a mom, so at 2:30 in the morning, in month number 4, when the baby's hungry and you've got like 3 hours of sleep in the past 3 months, nobody's feeling motivated to get up and handle those things and make sure the baby's fed and the diaper's clean. That's not, nobody's jumping up with their fists above their head screaming, yes, this is awesome. But what gets us through those moments when you're not feeling motivated is your sense of identity, meaning like who you are. And that's really what I like to bring to the forefront of what I do. And it's funny. I never thought about life the way I do today. Growing up, like I grew up in New Jersey, your average American cliche kid, no silver spoon, none of those things. We kind of had it tough actually a little bit growing up. We've had the power turned off in the house and that kind of stuff. But I wound up growing up, and I started my career in my early 20s. I think I just turned 22, and I became a police officer. And that was my career. That was my life. I got married like 1 year later. Still married now. It's been 22 years this year that my wife and I will be married, which is pretty awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, we have so much fun. We have a 12-year-old daughter now who's just freaking amazing. Like I love that kid, and we do. We have a lot of fun, and I'm very very blessed. And I always was. My biggest problem in hindsight was that everything was good, and when things are good, nobody feels the need to change anything or to question anything or to try to do anything else because look, if you're getting by and the bills are paid and you have a career and you're happily married and you have your kids are healthy and all those things are in place that the ground is stable, then why mess with it? Like don't mess with anything. And what wound up happening to get me on this path was about almost a decade ago now. It's 2009. It was December 2009 to be exact. I woke up like 1:30 in the morning with this massive, massive chest pain. And at the time, I had been an emergency medical technician for about 13 years. So I woke up, the room's completely dark. My wife's sleeping next to me. Our daughter was 3 at the time. She's sleeping down the hall. And I'm groggy, but I'm feeling this pain like I just got knifed in my heart. And the pain's radiating down my arm. And of course, being an EMT for so long, I start self-diagnosing, like just on autopilot, which is probably the worst thing I could have done. I was so mad because I'm thinking, wait a minute, pain's radiating down my arm. On a scale of 1 to 10, pain's about a 12. I'm having a hard time breathing, and I'm saying all these things are happening as I'm trying to wake up because I'm sound asleep. So I wound up sitting up, and this pain is just getting worse and worse, and I'm clutching my chest. And so I decided to do what us men do in those moments is I got up and tried to walk it off, because I'm tough and I can handle it. And the walking it off did not work. And within probably about 10, 15 seconds, something hit me that out of the blue, which was I realized if I was having a heart attack and if I didn't make it, I had a three-year-old daughter who's probably going to come bopping down the hall in the morning and she was going to find me. And it freaked me out. And if that didn't happen, then that would mean my wife was going to roll over in the morning and find me. So as much as I didn't want to be the alarmist and bother anybody with this suspected heart attack, I decided to, I knew I had to wake my wife up. So I quickly shook her awake. I said, babe, I think you got to call 911. I think I'm having a heart attack. Because phone was on her side of the room. And she jumps out of her sleep and she looks at me and she said, are you sure? And for a beat, like for a quick heartbeat, I tried to convince myself that I wasn't feeling what I was feeling, but I just shook my head and said, yeah, you need to call. And as soon as I said that and I saw her dialing and she started talking, it felt like there was a big dial in the center of my back that was labeled energy. And it felt like somebody was just turning that dial down really slow. And at that point, I had made my way to the foot of our bed and I just slumped down and I collapsed right there. Couldn't move. I could barely hear, like that sound, like when you're underwater in a swimming pool, you can know there's sound, but you have no idea what's being said. And my vision narrowed off, like down to like curtains closing on a stage, I like to call it. My vision got real narrow. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm 36 years old and I am dying. Like this cannot be happening. And what's funny is I was completely convinced that was it. I mean, I could hear my heart pounding in my head. Oh. And what was odd in hindsight is that I wasn't scared. Like I didn't have a fear of being dead. I got hit with this overwhelming wall of regret.
Yeah.
Because in a flash, it was like every single opportunity that I had to do so much more and create something more with my life. And don't get me wrong, I was completely grateful and should have been grateful for everything I had in my life at that point. Still am, always will be. But I realized that I had been settling. I wasn't trying, like really, really intentionally trying to be better at being a husband or being better at being a father. Like I just was taking like I just did what naturally came to me. So I had my tendencies that had, like everybody has, that developed over the years, and I was a good guy. And in my mind at the time, I just figured that's all I should be, is just me and be a good guy. But when that finality happened, man, all of a sudden I realized I left so many opportunities on the table. Like I heard myself just repeating over and over again, that I could have done so much more. I can do more. Like this can't be the end. I can be better. I can do more. I have more to offer to my family, to my friends, to my peers, to my community, to my society. There's more I can do and accomplish. And I didn't know what it was, but I just felt it. It was like a big void behind me that I realized I had left. And so of course I did the quintessential begging of God to let me live. And um, I was begging God to let me, God, please let me see my daughter grow up. Like I don't want to be gone. There's more I can do. And it's funny how when something traumatic happens like that, and in those moments, that it can seem like an hour has gone by, but in reality, it's probably about, 30 seconds maybe. So the ambulance came, and actually friends came, because I was a police officer in the town we lived in, and I got taken to the hospital, and I stayed there for a couple of days. Thank goodness. The good news was that they quickly realized, they obviously did testing, and I didn't have a heart attack. They think I had a TIA or a mini stroke.
Wow.
But they couldn't even confirm that. So they basically sent me home after a few days saying, try baby aspirin and call us if you have any more symptoms. Like
Right.
that, like honestly, that was the extent of the medical advice after all that.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I had they had what they called was a potential what was it called? Oh, what was the phrase they used? Not potential, but they thought I might have had a clot, like a brain clot. But then after a month or so of getting tests to rule that out completely, they finally gave me a clean bill of health that, they were like, smacked me on the butt and said, you're fine, go home. You'll be okay.
Oh my gosh. Do you feel like it was a miracle? Do you feel like there was divine intervention?
You know,
Because it
I,
felt so real to you. You felt like you were going out. Your light was
yeah,
going out,
I,
and you
I,
begged God to help you. And do you feel like
yeah,
it was a miracle?
I think it was a miracle that I had that experience. Um, I suspect that it was I suspect there's probably a mini stroke like they suggested, because I had some the people that were there, the squad that was there, they knew me, and they said, look, you had the quintessential facial droop on one side, like
Ah.
you were physically presenting as a stroke. And that weirded me out, because I was a healthy guy. I worked out a lot. Big guy. I'm like 6'4", about two. I'm gonna be kind and say about 235. It's probably about 240. But I'm a big guy. But I worked out all the time. I was healthy. I ate relatively well. I mean, my bad eating was done all in in my 20s. But at the time, I was getting more mature. I took good care of myself. But I think it was a miracle that I had it. That incident actually happened, because it was the worst, one of the worst days of my life, and absolutely one of the best days of my life at the same time. Because it was like that event was like a line of demarcation. Like there was a before, and there was absolutely an after that day, because everything changed. When I came home, I remember the day I got released from the hospital. My wife and I and my daughter, we were driving. I think we drove to the mall, and it was odd because we were all really quiet, just sitting in the car, and it was almost like this moment of, well, at least you're not dead. And like this silent, nobody's saying anything. And I remember out of nowhere, I just felt the tears welling up in my eyes, because I had never, ever, like I got goosebumps now when I reflect on how I felt driving the car at that moment, because I remember thinking, I am alive and I'm not going to waste this. I have no clue what I'm going to do differently.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was going to do differently, but I knew that something had changed, and that started this whole journey for me after that because things got weird and better, and it's been a crazy ride since then.
That is so cool. Well, I definitely want to get into like what you've accomplished since your brush with near death. I have a friend, this is ages ago. I was in a really advanced training of landmark education called Team Management and Leadership Program. And I was in
Okay.
that training for about 3 years. It was very intense.
Wow.
It was really cool. We got to do coaching with other groups and travel across the United States and Canada to these conferences, leadership conferences, that kind of thing. And
Hmm.
as part of it, we were doing these every quarter we would create a project and get our community to kind of come together. And this project was something that would help the world, something that help your community or
Mm.
the world. Well, one of my coaches, he was 1 year ahead of me, so we would coach the people in the year under us. And so
Okay.
he was one of my coaches. His name was Don Gary, and he was doing Ironmans, and all of a sudden his coach said, your times are getting worse, not better. You should go see your doctor. And he was
Hmm.
diagnosed with incurable um, lung cancer that just this
Oh,
kind of lung cancer that doesn't respond to chemo, radiation, or whatever.
yeah.
And he was sent home to die, and he's sitting there going, okay, I'm in this program, I'm in this training, and I have months to live. Like, and so he
Wow.
went through that little mopey, feeling sorry for himself. And he had been a smoker for
Sure.
many years
Hmm.
before giving it up. And so he thought to himself, you know what? And it just hit him. What's my project for this? For this, like, what's my, if I have 3 months or 4 months to live, what am I doing in the next
Hmm.
4 months to give back? And so
Wow.
he decided his project for that quarter was going to be, and I mean, it was all like it was very inspired. He had no idea how he was going to do it, but it was kind of like, hey, I've got 4 months left. What kind of impact am I going to make on this world? And he decided the best thing he could do was to tell children why they shouldn't start smoking. And he wanted
Hmm.
to go into the middle schools and start just showing them, like, hey, here's my lung scans, I'm dying, and show them, like, this is why you shouldn't start smoking. And
Wow.
of course he went to all the schools, and they said you have to talk to the superintendent. The superintendent would not give him the time of day. And so Gary, being persistent, thinking he's got 3 or 4 months to live,
Yeah.
basically sat outside the superintendent's office, and the only times that he could talk to him was when the superintendent left his office to go to the bathroom, and Gary would follow him to the stall, talk to him, pitch him the idea, come back to his office.
Wow.
And after about 4 days, the guy said, fine, but we have to, like, have you go through the proper channels and get a psyche value. I can't just let any stranger off the street talk to our kids.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, this is what happened. It turned into where he got an entire group of psychiatrists and psychologists together, and all these, like, counselors together. And he got in touch with all these doctors that were treating terminally ill patients that had illnesses from smoking. And he made this entire organization where these people on ventilators, on, people with, like, holes in their necks, or on
Hmm.
ventilators, or, these major illnesses from smoking,
Yeah.
would be invited as guest speakers into elementary schools and high schools and junior high schools, and show the children, just like, hey, this is what your life looks like if you start smoking when you're 15.
Wow.
Like this is what it looks like, you know what I mean?
That's
And so,
powerful.
yeah, it was so powerful. Well, what happened during this entire thing is that his doctor said, you know what, there's an experimental surgery, and we want to try it on you. And he's like, well, I've got nothing to lose. You guys are
Right.
saying I've got 4 months left. And so it's this very experimental procedure where they were going to take tiny, tiny strips of some of the cancer out, and they had a reason for why it may work, but it was a wing and a prayer, and it worked. And not only did it work, his lungs then grew back healthy lung tissue.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was so big that he was invited to speak at two of the major, like the East Coast and then the West Coast, major oncology conferences, because he was like a first ever, they've written him up. It's like this really
Yeah.
big, really cool thing. But part of the reason why he believes he healed was that the entire time he was dedicating his life to helping others and
Mm,
leaving a mark and squeezing the amount of like every drop of life he could out of every day. And
yeah.
he went on to take this project on to like a global level, and it's actually a program now that's going around the world. Um, and it got funding actually from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Steven Spielberg
Wow.
is part of it. His foundation is part of it. So it's really, really big. And it's now Don Gary's still alive, and it's like 12
That is
years later.
amazing.
But the reason why I'm sharing this story your story reminded me so much of that is that when you're faced with this I this you have such a limited time on this planet.
Hmm.
It's very uncomfortable for us to face our own mortality. And both my parents have died, so I've definitely faced
Mm,
it. This idea that, we may not be here tomorrow or in a month or in a year.
yeah.
How do you coach people, and maybe you could coach us, to get past that uncomfortable feeling sorry for ourselves, or that uncomfortable ego, the
Yeah.
fear of the death of the ego,
Yes.
and so we
Yeah.
can get past that and go, get past that, so we can go, okay, I'm only here for for maybe I have a year left, maybe I have 20 years left. Either way, how can I get past that fear of the death of the ego so that I can live the biggest life possible, and not let the ego hold me back because it's afraid of failure, or afraid of really petty things, or afraid of being vulnerable.
Yeah. That's a great question. And man, that story is amazing. It reminds me of a guest I had on my show. Her name is Danielle LaRock, and her I started smiling as you're telling the story when I realized that he started living. Like he actually had this opportunity to heal when after he started creating this powerful
Mm-hmm.
purpose behind what he was going to do with his time. And the reason I bring up Danielle is because her whole she's another coach, but she teaches from an experience she had and multiple experiences where people that were suffering some type of illness. She found this by accident actually, but she's following a lot of cases where people are healing because they start performing work or engaging in work, whether it's a career or a connection to a new charity or something they become involved in that gives them a sense of purpose, and their physical uh, symptoms start to fade. It's pretty amazing. I'll have to give you her name. Make sure I give you her name because she's really an amazing person. I had her on my show, and she's so much fun. And I thought I expected a bunch of like I hate to use the term woo woo talk, but that she she openly understands it as well. But she's very much a pragmatist in a lot of ways. But yeah, that's what that story is amazing and reminds me of. As far as getting people to really embrace these things. It's funny, you asked me earlier whether I thought what happened to me was a miracle or not, and it reminded me of something one of the big things I like to remind people of when I'm coaching them, and that's we wind up stressed out when we start asking this unanswerable question of why. Like, why did I collapse like that? Or why did
Mm.
this person get cancer? Why did this person get hit by a car? And as long as we're alive, we can do one of two things. We can keep asking why these things happened to us,
Yeah,
or
why
we
does this
can,
always happen to me?
yeah. So we can either ask why or keep wondering that open-ended why question, or we can just create the why. Like we can just create it. Like so for me, um, when I went through my incident, when I was done, I said, okay, I don't know why this happened, and I'm never gonna know exactly why it happened, but I'm gonna create a reason why it happened. Like there's something is gonna come from this. I'm gonna build this into something that is gonna affect me, and it's going to affect my immediate family, and it's going to affect the people that I reach with whatever the heck it is that I want up doing, because I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't sure at the time. And there can be a lot of hurt egos when things happen to us, whether it's a breakup or whether it's the weight that just can't seem to come off, or all these different things. There's with all the guests and all the stories you've heard, with this amazing show that you do. There's so many different stories and challenges that people wind up facing, and our you mentioned the word ego. Our ego can really get involved in demanding an answer, because a lot of times we want to know why something happened, because the real question is, why am I the type of person that this would happen to? Because it can wind up feeling like a label that, people quickly start labeling themselves like,
Yep.
it happened because I'm unlucky, or it happened because, I was broken up with because I'm not good enough, or I wasn't pretty enough, or I wasn't handsome enough, or I wasn't strong enough or muscular enough. And a lot of times those ego-based questions, even though we may ask them in a way that kind of softens the blow, like, oh, I don't know why this happened to me. And it sounds kind of an innocent question, but it can in many ways be a damaging question, because if there's an underlying reason why the questions are being answered, and it's completely disempowering. But when we decide that, okay, I'm not sure why it happened, but I'm going to create a reason why it happened. Like, they left me because I now have, they left me for the reason that I now have the opportunity to create a better relationship with the next person I meet. That's why. This is an opportunity. And what I find so interesting, what I love about life, is that we never know whether we are factually accurate or not.
Right.
Like how do you know whether it's factually accurate? Like, but we get to choose, and as long as you choose and you believe it and you live it, well, then it becomes real, and then it becomes right.
Well, and some people might argue for their limitations, like,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
there are reasons, and I can prove them to you.
sure,
And
sure,
the fact is that we are meaning making machines, so we can
yeah,
always look for evidence
yeah,
to support our hypothesis. But
yes.
that's doing it backwards.
It is backwards. You're so right. You're so right. There's a Harvard doctor. I forget his name. I was watching him on a show with John Asseroff, and he said a really simple phrase. He said, "Our minds are excuse making machines.
Right.
They are they just are. That's what they do. They come up with these fear based reasons why we can't do stuff. I'm not that type of person. I'm not a winner. I'm not. We come up with all this stuff, but the truth is, we just have choices, and even though we don't always get to choose what happens, we always get to choose what's going to happen next. And those series, when we make it a habit to keep making those small decisions or what seem like small decisions of, okay, what am I going to do next in this situation? Like in the next 5 minutes, how am I going to handle this situation? 5 minutes, just get by those 5 minutes. When we start when we start handling those micro moments intentionally, and it becomes that, and we build that habit, and we build that mental muscle of training ourselves to be intentional about what we're going to do with whatever it randomly landed in our lap. Then that's when we can really start charting our own course.
Love it. It's so we're taking the negative thing that's happened to us in the past, or is
Yeah,
happening to us right now, and catching ourselves in victim mode and going,
yeah,
okay, wait a second.
yeah,
I'm making this mean something, like, because I'm, not good enough or ugly, or my dad didn't love me, or I'm a
yeah,
woman, or I'm fat, or whatever we have, or I'm not trying, maybe I'm lazy, maybe I'm unconsciously sabotaging myself, maybe it's genetic, like, whatever the excuses we're giving, we go, but none of those excuses are empowering me or serving me.
yeah.
And so, just as made up as, or as real and made up as those feel,
Hmm.
I can make a new interpretation of the why that
Yeah.
serves me, and it will feel just as real. So so you're taking that situation. I love your example of breaking up. So my husband and I have been married, this is our 10th year of marriage.
Awesome.
And
Congratulations.
thank you. And it's been nonstop awesomeness. He is amazing.
Nice.
And we actually work together and live together, and we're almost never apart. Unlike other couples that like both have to leave and go to jobs and they only see each other, in the evenings,
Yeah,
like we are with each other all the time. And
that's awesome.
so we've really accelerated our communication skills to survive. But what's interesting is I'm his fourth wife and final because I just don't believe in divorce. I just believe in working it out if it's the right match. You know what I mean? And for
Yeah,
me, I knew
absolutely.
I just knew that it was going to be hard work, and I'm just like one of those people where divorce is not for me. I'm gonna work this out, just like I watched my
Yeah.
parents do, I guess. And he had to go through those three other relationships to gain the
Hmm.
learnings. And so at the time when I met him, he felt a little bit like victimized by three. He was calling them failed marriages,
Yeah.
and I helped him see that, but what did you learn? And, look at where they are
Yeah.
now and you are now. And, everyone can be happy and live a better life and take those moments of your past and gain the learnings and take them into your future
Yes.
versus, oh, woe is me, I'm just a pile of failed marriages. And
Yep.
so it really set him up for success in our relationship when I had him focus on, well, what did you learn? And it might have been, the good and the bad, like learn from the good and learn from the bad,
Yeah.
so that you can apply that to your now and your future. Um, and now he talks like joyously and happily about his past marriages because
Yeah.
he even says like they forged me into the man I am now, because I would not have been able to have had the relationship I have now with my wife, me with Ashley, had I not had those three past marriages.
Yeah.
And it's funny because then we'll talk to our neighbor who's divorced many years, and he's currently married to his wife and he's in a good marriage. But if he starts talking about his ex-wife, he goes into complete victim mode and is
Mm.
very, visibly upset still. And you can see he's really holding on to the emotions of the past, and it's like he's still stuck there in the anger and the betrayal, and that was years ago, and you can tell it's still affecting him now.
Yeah. I always tell people, that one of the best things we can do for ourselves emotionally is a lot of people say your emotions depend on what you focus on. And I think there's two parts of it. It's one of the things I coach on is this short-term emotional strategy. Um, but a lot of common like self-helpism is that, where your attention goes, energy flows, from Tony Robbins. And in many ways, it's true. But there's plenty of times where things happen and it has to get your attention. Like if you have
Mm.
your friend that you were talking about, when you have a chronic and deadly illness, you can't just choose not to focus on it. There are things that need to be done.
Hmm.
I mean, it sounds crazy, but the second half of that is your emotions are going to come from what you pay attention to, which, like I said, sometimes you can't choose, and the story that you attach to it.
So let's say if the our person that we're talking about has a cancer diagnosis, they're
Yeah,
feeling a range of emotions: sad,
yeah,
angry, betrayed, victim,
yeah,
and you're saying they can't just ignore the cancer, just go about their day. I mean, that would also be bad.
yeah.
But they can't wallow in the negative emotions, because the negative emotions are not actually coming from the cancer diagnosis. They're coming from what they made the cancer diagnosis mean.
Yes. I mean, if we think about it, our emotions aren't because of the thing that happens. And I've lost my father to cancer. I've lost young friends to cancer.
Hmm.
We lost my wife's mom to cancer. Like I by all means understand the severity of the disease. I ran one half marathon in my life, and I wore it as a fundraiser for the American Cancer Society, and in honor of my dad. And that's a whole nother story. The half marathon, that was fun. um, but yes, to answer your question, I think more accurately, they can wallow in that negative emotion if they want to, but they don't. But they don't have to. It's a choice. We get to choose what we're going to do, or we get to choose the story that we're going to attach to our current situation, our story. Back in 2012, um, I was out it was a Friday night, and I wound up going to a Philadelphia Phillies game. And most of the time on Friday nights, we would be home. And so my buddy just happened to call me out of the blue. Said, "Hey, I got tickets for the game. Do you want to go?" I said, "Sure." It was, I think it was July. Yeah, it was hot out. It was a beautiful day out. Drove out to Philly. No sooner do we get there, crack a beer in the parking lot, my phone rings, and it's my wife telling me that a thunderstorm had just came through and knocked a bunch of trees down, and they crashed into the house.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so of so of course immediately my brain starts trying to downplay it, and I'm like, okay, I'm sure there's some branches on the house and maybe broke a window or something, but I'm sure everything's fine. And within a minute, my niece, who was living with us at the time, she grabs the phone, and says, "No, Uncle, it's bad. You need to get home right now." And in Horizon, because we live in New Jersey, but it's only about 20 minutes from Philadelphia. I could see that the sky was really dark in the distance, even though it was, bright and shiny where we were. So I get home, and actually, let me tell you, we had these massive trees. None of them were on our property. We had like a quarter acre property here, but a bunch of these trees sheared in half and they had come crashing through our roof, through the attic, through the ceiling. One of them landed on our kitchen table.
Ah!
One of them went through the roof and wound up in our daughter's bathroom upstairs on the second floor. Another one went through the fence, and I forget where the fourth one went. I think it was on the far side of the second floor. Six figures in damage to the house.
Oh my
Now,
gosh.
it was horrific, and it was still pouring rain when I got there, and water is just flooding through. Remember the movie Jumanji, the original
Yes,
Jumanji,
yes.
where the water is just running through the house during that scene with with the flood and everything. I was waiting for the gators to like just come floating through the house. And the reason I bring that story up is because the truth is it was horrible. I mean, it was bad. From a homeowner standpoint, it was a holy crap moment. This is about as bad as it gets, short of your entire house just going up in flames. It was really, really bad. But we decided to choose a different story because the truth was, normally on a Friday night, my wife and I would have been sitting at that kitchen table that had this massive tree that had to be lifted out with a crane.
Oh.
We would have been sitting there sipping a glass of wine, talking about the week. Our daughter Sophia would have been in that bathroom where the tree went through on the second floor. It would have been her bath time, Friday night bath time, 2012. So she was 6 years old. She would have been in the tub when that tree came through, and so the three of us would have physically. There's a really high chance that one, if not all of us, would have been seriously hurt, if not killed, if you saw the size of this tree. So again, back to miracles, just so happened that I had a friend call me, which got me out of the house. And when I went to the game, my wife and daughter and my niece, they just decided they were going to go to the mall since I wasn't home anyway. That got us out of the house for this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we could have gone two ways with the story. We could have certainly and justifiably talked about how this wasn't fair. Why did this happen? Our house is done the way we want it, and now it's destroyed and this is going to take months to repair and all that stuff. We could have just lived in misery, or we could choose to say, wow, we are so lucky that our daughter didn't get hurt and we didn't get hurt. So we got to choose. Neither story would have been factually incorrect, but like I always say, how do you want to live? Like emotionally, what do you want to attach yourself to? What's the story what are the stories that you want to have going on in your life? Because it's all choice. It is so much of it. Not the circumstances, the things that happen randomly like that. We couldn't control that. But the experience that comes from it, the emotions that get generated, we choose the stories that generate the emotion. So we chose gratitude instead of the self-pity. And it can sound, I notice to some people can hear it and say, that sounds really dismissive or flippant, but trust me, I get it. There are plenty of things that happen, and we've all been through. Ashley, you've been through more things than I can imagine. All of us have stuff that happens, but we don't have to suffer more than we have to suffer, if that makes sense.
We don't have to suffer any more
Then
than
we
than
then
we
we have to
than we
suffer.
have. Yeah, exactly. Because like
Like the event. Yeah.
grieving is natural.
Yes.
And
Yes.
like when my mom died, I mean, it was I was 22 at the time. I was young. She was my best friend, and we didn't know she was gonna, like, the entire time she had cancer. We just thought she was, this was just a bump in the road. We were gonna get over it. And
Yeah.
so when the doctors came in and said, you have a few hours left, and my mom slipped into a coma, I mean,
Wow.
it it was, I had very little time to wrap my brain around that I would never speak to my mom again. I would never hug her again.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was the hardest thing that ever happened to me. And then 6 years later, getting a phone call from the sheriff saying that they found my dad passed away
Mm.
in the hotel he was staying at while he was on a business trip. And I'd just spoken to him the day before, because it was Christmas, and
Yeah.
he was going to come down and visit. And it, those moments where you've lost the most important people or the most important things in your life, and you just can't see a future, and you're now all of a sudden the future that you envisioned, because I always envisioned my parents and my future, all of a sudden the future was in question, my life was in question, and there's this
Yeah.
giant blank spot anytime I thought of the future, right?
Yeah.
And that, like, let's say a cancer diagnosis, or any kind of, diagnosis, or any kind of illness, you can't see, it's hard to see the future in which you're healthy again when you're suffering so much. It's hard to see a
Yes.
future that you're in love again after losing a loved one, or or going through a divorce or whatever.
Yeah.
And so there is that point of grief, but at what point are
Hmm.
we not needlessly, but at what point are we amplifying the amount of suffering, and
Hmm.
and dragging our own selves through the mud? And that's unhealthy. There's a
Yeah.
healthy amount of grieving, and then there's, I love what you said, is that there's choosing gratitude. I mean, it took me years to choose gratitude that my parents passed away. And I know that that sounds really weird, but I know them, and they would want me to be happy.
Yeah.
They would want
Yeah.
me to find life again, and
Yeah.
they would not want me to suffer. They would really want me to thrive and be
Hmm.
successful in my life, and so they would want me to choose gratitude. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful for the time I had. I had to go through a list. It's like, well, what, I mean, thinking about having lost both my parents, what am I grateful for?
Hmm.
I'm not grateful they died. I know that sounds horrible, but I'm so grateful for the time I had with them. And
Yeah.
even though it was short, I mean, it was worth it. It was so
Yeah.
worth every moment with them, and I'm grateful for the memories, and I'm grateful for all the lessons that I can pass on to my children.
Yeah.
And so it's that gratitude that now I feel a shift, in my tears. It's no longer that victimization. Now it's, well, what can it then begs the question, what can I do with the lessons I have in my past? And what
Yeah.
can what my gratitude now brightens and creates a new future.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so, it's so powerful, and you are so correct. I mean, we don't get, yeah, I lost my father in 94,
Mm,
and, it's not about being grateful that they're gone. I remember when my dad was, when I was a kid, I was probably about 14 years old, and for whatever reason, my dad decided to have this very brief talk with me about, basically telling me, look, I'm not always going to be here. And then he gave me like a little short checklist of things to do while I'm gone. Like, I don't want you. And he was old. My dad was much older when he had me. I think he was 50 something when he had me. So by then he's even older than that. He said, I don't want you crying and stuff when I'm gone. You don't need to do that. But take care of your
yeah,
mom
you take care of
and
your
always be a
mom.
good, yeah, take care of your mom and be a good man. And he wasn't dying. This was like years before he was even, diagnosed he had colon cancer.
Mm,
Um, But I always remember him telling me not to cry. And I remember when he died, I'm like, well, that ain't gonna happen because these waterworks are
What's so
coming.
wrong
Like,
with
so
crying? I
yeah,
mean,
sorry
geez.
to let you down. But yeah, it comes a point where I look at it. For me, I look at it this way, and I certainly don't suggest that I have the answers to tell someone what to do with their grief or their struggle, regardless of what it is, whether it's losing someone or losing a job. It doesn't matter what it is. But for me, when he was gone, and once that initial, powerhouse of grief was there, and I began to start functioning again, I had to be honest about myself and say, okay, why do I miss him? And I missed him because he was a great guy, not just because he was my dad, which of course, I had the attachment, the physical attachment, because he was my dad, but he was just the world needed, in my opinion, we need more people like him in the world, and I missed having that influence directly on me and him being around. And you were talking earlier about parents taking care of everything and being the administrative facilitators for life. He was that for me,
Mm,
but I knew I had to be honest and say, okay, he was a good guy, and he would have wanted me to be a good man, and he would not have wanted me to go through my whole life being dependent. And I missed him because, in part, I missed his advice. So then
mm,
I had to be honest and say, okay, if he had the ability to straight out send me an email right now and tell me what to do and how he would want me to live, what would he tell me?
mm,
And if I was wallowing around every day and self pitying and all that stuff because he was gone, his email would be in all caps saying, "You better knock it the heck off, live your life, take care of your friends, take care of your family, and become the man that I try to raise you to be." So, if I'm going to miss him because I miss his advice, I got to take it. I have to take, like, we have to take the advice that we know we would get from somebody we loved. Because otherwise, if I didn't take that advice and if I wasn't honest with myself to say, okay, I know what he would tell me to do, and I know he wouldn't tolerate me pitying myself all the time, then if I'm going to miss him for the good advice he had, I need to take it, or else I'm being disingenuous to myself. So that's, for me, that's kind of how I would give myself a kick in the pants, when I had those moments where the emotions would come back up, 6 months later, a year later, and if I'm honest, sometimes 5 years later, 10 years later, I have moments where, it comes back. You
mm-hmm.
miss you hear a song, or you see an old movie, or read a book that was on a shelf, whatever it is. We're all going to have those moments, and those are okay. But we have to listen for the advice that we would have gotten if they were still here. At least that's one of my tricks for being fair with myself.
I love it. I love it. So you're not a motivational speaker.
Now I'm all about identity.
That's interesting. Now your two biggest sort of niches are like high performance mindset training, and you said networking. You help, but you've got you help create clients. I'm just reading what's on your website.
Yeah.
So and then you also help with relationships. So you do relationship coaching. Can you explain a bit about the kinds of clients you help?
Yeah, sure. I got into coaching, like you mentioned earlier. I went to University of Oklahoma for my degree in leadership and coaching, but really I've been sort of unofficially mentoring since the '90s in my previous career. So I've always loved teaching and helping people get from point A to point B. And after my event happened, and after coming back from the hospital, I started doing a bunch of different things, which was, one, I went back to school, and I started getting into, for the first time in my life, I started getting into personal development, because when I got out of the hospital, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go back and finish a couple degrees. I finished my undergrad and then got my graduate degree. Um, but I knew I wanted to also do something more to impact the way I was living. So my first parlay into what I was going to do different was to start reading some books on personal development, partly because I had never done them before. I wasn't looking for faith. I'd been raised in a church, so I wasn't looking for a spiritual answer, so to speak, but I was looking for perspective. It's probably, if I had to sum it up in one word, I was looking for a different perspective. And when I started reading people like Tony Robbins and Raman Sharma and Zig Ziglar and Les Browns, and I started getting all these perspectives that, to me, I enjoyed it because a lot of what I was learning made sense. And I love for things to make sense. Like I'm not one of those people that will listen to or say things just because they sound good and they feel nice and fluffy. There's got to be something behind it. So that's what attracted me into the personal development world, because I was reading things that, when I reflected on my own life and my experiences and the interactions I had with other people, I'm like, this stuff really makes sense. So what wound up happening was I decided to started my own website. I started blogging. And then from there, I started listening to podcasts and decided doing that. And then I started, like, little by little, getting coaching clients. And it started out informally, where I would just, somebody would have an issue and they would want to schedule a call with me and just talk about what was going on. And I wound up realizing that this, and it's even in its infancy, was going to be something that I was going to be teaching. Like, that was going to be my thing, because in the 2 decades I spent in law enforcement, if somebody asked me, and it was funny because years ago my wife did ask me, she was like, well, if there was one thing you had to say in your career as a police officer that you loved the most, what did you enjoy the most? And by far, it was teaching. I taught in the police academy for 13 years. I loved helping people get from point A to point B. So when I started learning these things about human behavior and motivational theories and leadership theories, I realized really quickly that this is my jam. Like, this is going to be what I'm doing. And this is the stuff I want to share, because it was changing my life. Like, I went from, over the course of just a few years, like, professionally, I went from being just a patrol officer on the road that was at one point kind of disgruntled with, how things were going for me in my career. And suddenly now I'm at the top of the food chain. I'm a captain just years later. And it didn't happen by accident. And certainly didn't happen because I'm just naturally amazing. It happened because I started changing my mindset about what I was doing, what I was demanding of myself, what my standards were, what my comparisons were like. Was I comparing myself to other people, or was I looking inward? And I started demanding that, instead of hoping and wishing and praying things get better, I had to get to work. Like, I actually had to create something. So when I started embracing those things, it changed my life drastically. I mean, really drastically. It changed it's funny because my wife and I, our marriage was great to begin with. She's amazing. It's funny, you were talking earlier about your husband having had previous relationships that obviously didn't work out. And when my wife and I met, we both were on the heels of really bad breakups. And one of the things that got us to click so fast, because we got married, our first date was in August, we got married in November. and we decided we were going to get married probably 2 to 3 weeks into our relationship. And nice. We did. We just eloped. We got married in November of '96. And it's been awesome ever since. But when I started learning this stuff, and I did not just suddenly become like the master of mental strategy, like right out of the box. I was a hot mess. I mean, I was learning stuff, and it was awkward. And I was trying to be like this positive guy. And I was writing, I started a Facebook page, and I was writing articles on my website and saying all this stuff and these positive things. I'll never forget one day my wife and I don't even remember what we got into a disagreement about something. And she looked at me and she said it right in front of our daughter. She goes, you know what? You need to read those quotes that you're writing. And man, you want to talk about a rib shot. I was like, oh my gosh. But it was nothing stings worse. The only thing that stings worse than criticism, Ashley, is when you know the criticism's right. And
Mm-hmm.
she was 100% right because it's a process. So that really back then, about a decade ago, is when I started realizing that coaching was for me. So yeah, to get to your question about coaching, I love helping people in their um, relationships. Most of my clients wind up being either entrepreneurs or people with the entrepreneurial spirit. But when I do coaching, it's really whole life coaching. And they may reach out to me because of specific reasons. Like sometimes I'll get somebody that calls and wants to schedule book coaching with me because they're having issues in their relationship. But it's really not just about, okay, what's the problem going on in your marriage or relationship, and let's figure out how to fix it. It is a very big picture look at what's going on and where they want to be. Um, I'm very much about the why, like what is it you're doing and where you're trying to get to and why. Like whether they themselves are a coach, they could sometimes it's fitness coaches or other life coaches, but sometimes they're entrepreneurs that have they're into to marketing or online marketing, things like that. But regardless of why they're coming to me, I very much enjoy learning about who the person is. I can never see me not coaching because I love meeting people, learning who they are, learning what they love. And I wound up being a person that works mainly, even if it's about relationships, I wind up just by happenstance, I think, attracting entrepreneurs because, like you, Ashley, they have this sense of a mission behind them. Like they're not just, you don't just do what you do because it just seems like a good idea at the time. Like there's a reason why you're sharing all these shows and having these guests on and you're impacting lives. You know it's making a difference. And there's so many different ways why people do things like that. And I thrive on it. And I think part of the reason I personally thrive on it and I love coaching people through it is because I wasn't doing it before. Before my event, I was just doing what was kind of handed to me. So when I get the opportunity to meet people that have something that they love doing, I mean, with a deeper meaning to them behind it, because two people can be doing the same thing. One person is just doing it because, pays the bills, and somebody else is just like, I could not even imagine not doing this. I'm sure you've met people like that are in the same profession, but they look at it completely differently.
Totally.
Um, I
So,
totally, yeah, I totally love coaching the people that have a reason behind it.
so what you're saying is before your event, before your near death experience,
Hmm.
you were just going through life. Basically, life was being handed to you, or events were kind of,
Yeah.
life was happening to you, and you were,
Yes.
reacting to life. But after your event, you found yourself more and more having an intention with a deeper meaning and
Yeah.
interacting and helping other people who have a deeper meaning as well, who have connected to their life purpose.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny. When I mentioned before that life was good. So I had been at the time I was a police officer. I was on a SWAT team. I was teaching firearms at the police academy, and I was doing all these things that I enjoyed. But the truth is, and part of the reason why I mentioned earlier when I had collapsed on the ground and I thought I was about to check out, part of the reason I had a regret is because I knew I wasn't even trying. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was doing the right things, but I was doing them because they just felt natural. They
Hmm.
came easy to me. Like
Oh,
teaching came
you
easy
weren't
to me.
challenging yourself.
Yes, I was not challenging myself. I was coasting.
You
A
were
lot of times
living
I
in the
just say,
comfort zone. You were living in the gray
yes,
zone of life.
totally was living in a comfort zone.
Yeah.
And once I got out of that, because trust me, when you are a veteran police officer and you wind up starting a motivational website that has your name as the URL, and, and you're writing these articles about personal growth and development, and then you start a podcast and you're doing all these things. That is not the comfort zone. That was not my wheelhouse. That's not who uh, who I was in my mind at the time.
Hmm.
But as
Sounds
I
like you
started,
created yourself. You
yes,
had to really push
Yeah.
yourself outside the comfort zone and push
Yep.
yourself and to, either strip away. I love this analogy of we're stripping away layers of who we're not
Yes.
so that we
Yeah.
can be the person we know we are inside.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
that's,
and
yeah,
then you
that's what
see how
happened.
much you grow, you see how much you expand. Someone asked me today, what has becoming a health coach, like, how has that changed your life? And I
Mm.
thought about it for a sec. It was the idea was stumping me because I said, even though I graduated from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition last year. It's a year-long
Awesome.
health coach training program. And I thought, and I said, I don't really know who I was before this because
Hmm.
it permeated my consciousness. It became it, it really shifted.
Yeah.
It shifted who I am, and it
Yeah.
allowed me to strip away who I'm not. And
Hmm.
so, I'm just so much more aware and conscious, and I've learned so many things, and I've really grown on so many levels that I just don't know who I was prior to that. But I love who I am now.
That is so awesome. I love it too, Ashley. You're pretty awesome. I've definitely had the same feeling. Like going back 10 years ago, it's funny. Like if I look at what I do right now, I still work full time Monday to Friday as a police officer. I don't get to retire till next year. I'm a captain now, so I'm in a chair in the office. I'm like paper pusher, but I still work full time doing that. But at the same time, I do keynote speaking. I have a podcast. I do coaching. I'm just finishing today. I mean, it's still open on my computer over there. I'm finishing my first book. I have to send it off to the editor next week.
Nice.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
I'm excited. It's called Million Dollar Influence. It's a book about influence in business and life. Um, so I have all these things that I'm doing, and they just feel totally normal. But there are moments like my wife and I'll just be sitting talking, and she said to me today, she's like, "I'm so stinking proud of you," and I'm like, "Why?" She said, "Yeah, you don't realize sometimes you don't realize how much you've accomplished and what you're doing."
Mm-hmm.
And it's really true because I'm sure you know as many episodes as you do, when you're in it, you're not paying attention or being impressed by yourself. There's too much to do.
Yep.
And but it's the truth. It becomes part of who you are. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the most important thing is that we allow ourselves to take the journey, because what was happening to me prior to this event, to my event almost a decade ago, is that I wasn't journeying beyond what I thought in my own mind, my story of who I thought I had to be, what I was capable of doing. Because to me, and I didn't really get into this before, I had a lot of limits on what I thought I was capable of. So, for example, I wound up with a really good career in New Jersey as a police officer. The salary's really good, the pension's great. I had childhood friends I was working with. So for me, as at the time, I had no college education. I didn't come from money. Um, as a kid, we moved around from rental house to rental house because we didn't own a home. I went to private school, but I wound up going to that private school. It was a faith-based school. I found out later that I was going there out of the goodness of the heart of the people that owned the school because we didn't have the money for the tuition. Um, I thought that who I was my financial status, my cultural status, and I thought that when you're born into this box, and that's who you will remain. And if you're able to have something outside of that box fall into it, you are lucky. So for me, winding up with a really good career where I wasn't really worried about money, and then winding up meeting this amazing woman who had had been through similar bad experiences, so we knew what we wanted to create out of this marriage, and it's why we've lasted this long. I was so, I felt so lucky. So if someone would have came to me and like challenged me to do something different, I would have looked at them and say, "What are you talking about? Like I should be totally grateful for everything I had." But you know, post event, what I realized was I should have been grateful for what I was capable of doing. Like we should be grateful that we don't have limits to what we're doing. And if we're not exploring the boundaries of those limits, then we're kind of being ungrateful.
Mm.
And that's what really shifted for me. I mean, in that instant, as I was sitting there at the foot of the bed, that's kind of what shifted. Was I felt when I said I had a wall of regret hit me when I thought I was about to die, it's because I realized how ungrateful I was. Like that's what hit me. Like how dare you sit there fully capable of doing and creating and impacting people way better than you have been. And there you are coasting on your butt, taking what comes your way and not even trying to stretch your comfort zone and see what else there is to learn and what else there is to do and what you might be doing after this career you're in and whether you should finish it out or whether you should do something different. Like there was no exploration going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not exploring and we're not stretching and if we're not looking to see what can we do next or what we can do better or what we can improve, then we're kidding ourselves.
What would you
And,
say to those listeners who have the golden handcuffs? So they're not happy with their life, but the golden handcuffs being, but the what they're doing now pays them. So
mm-hmm.
I don't really like my job, or my job, is okay, but it's not my life purpose, but it pays the bills. So I
Yeah.
should let the definition of the golden handcuffs where you're
Yep.
attached to. I mean, and I would hate to use the golden handcuffs in the terms of a marriage, but sometimes people don't look to better the marriage, and they just kind of they're just sort of like, it is what it is, and I should like it because
Yeah.
it's keeping a roof over our heads, and maybe we're married for the children or whatever. But people buy into their gray zone,
Yes.
because and
Yeah.
they should themselves, they go,
Yep.
I should be happy, I should, this is paying the bills, so I should stick with it.
Yeah.
What do you say to those people?
I say if you're telling yourself you should be happy, then it kind of sounds like you're not, because it sounds like there's some self judgment going on. To those people, I would say this: one of the quickest things you can do is to have some moments of silence and some honesty, and sort of ask yourself some very simple questions. Number one, is what you're doing what you really want to be doing? Like, do you go to work saying I'm so lucky to be able to doing this to be doing this, and if not, then why not? Same thing about your relationship. If you're in a relationship, do you wake up in the morning feeling lucky as all hell to have that person next to you? And if not, why not? And what needs to change? And I'm going to put a caveat in there and say right off the bat that usually what needs to change is us. Because because it's not easy to hear, but it's the truth.
But it's the only thing we
Yeah,
have control over.
yeah, absolutely. It's one of my first rules. If we're not taking 100% responsibility, then we're giving up power. And I know there's a lot of people that will disagree and say, well, I can see taking 99% responsibility because most of the time, yeah, we should be responsible for what goes on. But, there's those moments where it's not our fault. And to that, I say, when do you think we are going to interpret that 1%? We're probably going to interpret that, okay, this is that 1% of time when we need it, when we really need when we're at the peak of those moments where we really need to be taking responsibility. I'll give you an example to go back to my house event. If I wasn't taking 100% responsibility for my life and my reactions and my emotions at the time of that event, that certainly would have been that 1% of times where those trees crashing into my house certainly weren't my fault. So that would have been my out. That would have been the 1% of time where I could have let myself go emotionally and been blaming the world and wallowed in this self-pity because sometimes it's not our fault. But the truth was, it's always my job to be responding. It's 100% my responsibility to take care of what happened. Doesn't mean it was my responsibility to prevent it, but it was my responsibility to respond to it.
Taking 100% responsibility for your life and everything that's happened to you, and everything that all your results in life,
Yeah.
is not allocating fault or blame.
No, it's not.
So if someone's been raped,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that they're allocating fault or blame when they take 100% responsibility for what's happened to them in their past. But by
Yeah.
taking 100% responsibility for their life now,
Yes.
they are no longer giving up their power.
Yes. Yeah.
And now they're finally empowered, because if you're 100% responsible for every single action that you take in your life, then you have the power to change your life now and to no longer let others control you or change you or victimize you or,
Yep.
have any power over you.
Yeah. Absolutely. If we are giving up responsibility, then we're giving up power.
You
Like
know,
if we're,
I want to dive into this a little bit on a community level,
yeah.
because you have a unique perspective as someone who's been a police officer for many years and now a police captain. What, as individuals, can we do to help shift the consciousness in our country so that we can come together as individuals and see, work together instead of victimize, blame, and further the violence and further the divide? Because I think
Mhm.
that as a police officer, you've got that perspective where, unfortunately, there's been, in unfortunately in the media, police officers, in the last few years have been pigeonholed in a way, um, because of a few events. And so, what can we do as individuals to what actions could we take in our mindset and in our daily interactions so that we can help shift this global consciousness to come together as a loving community and create a positive future?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny. Well, first of all, the media does what it does. Media has to make money. They have to self-sustain. So they're going to sell stories that sell. Unfortunately, most of the stories that sell are the worst stories. Now, I don't say that to say that, there have been some horrific events, and I mean flat out horrific events
Mm-hmm.
involving law enforcement over the years. There has been. I mean, look, there is no denying the history of this country. Like we all
Mm-hmm.
didn't just magically show up here out of nowhere. This country has its dirt, and it is what it is. However, to answer your question, um, the one thing we can do to, I'm going to speak for myself.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I do um, to get through this, because I have a unique perspective. So I have this complete multicultural background. I mean, my father was Cherokee Indian, Italian, African American, and I think something else. It's funny. I just sent away for a ancestry DNA
Yeah,
test,
yeah.
and I think I'm gonna come back with it like a stack of paper when they finally tell me like everything that's mixed in my background.
Oh man,
Because
those DNA tests. Oh, I have a friend who was adopted
yeah,
by the Native American community, and he was raised Native American. He was told that
yeah,
or his biological parents are Native American. He
uh-huh,
became a shaman. Goes back to do Sundance every year. It's this moment. It's this time where they fast and they
okay,
attach their bodies to these giant poles, and they basically pull flesh off their bodies, and they hang themselves from trees with
oh
these. I
gosh,
mean, it is like crazy. Just Google Sundance. But they also do these sweat lodges, and then they don't
yeah,
eat for days, and they have to dance all day long from sunrise to sunset, and it's intense. And they have these visions, right? They have this
yeah,
lucid
I bet,
dreaming, and the spirit talks to them. And so he was a shaman, everything. And then
okay.
and like his whole life, his whole identity was wrapped up in this. And he gets the DNA test back.
No, don't
He's
say it.
100% Scottish.
Stop
It
it.
completely destroyed him.
You've got to be kidding me.
So don't get that test unless you're like on an emotional level you're gonna be okay with
Oh, I'm totally
it.
fine. I can't wait
Yeah.
to find out.
It's
Yeah, I
awesome.
can't wait. Because on my mom's side, it's a whole nother salad that's all like mixed together.
Yeah.
She's got French Canadian, African American, Irish is in there somewhere. So I can't wait to get this pie chart because I think
Nice.
it's just gonna say Earth. It's just gonna have
Congratulations, you're an earthling.
yes,
I
yeah,
wish I
you're an
wish
Earth.
everyone would identify as an earthling because we could get
Wouldn't it
past
be,
so much stuff and just start like healing the earth, right? If we
yeah,
all identified as earthlings.
it would ruin a whole lot of conversations that are going on lately. But but I do want to get to answer your question. So for what I do and one of the best things I learned from or that I learned by watching my dad was that every time he had a conversation, it was like there was this curiosity behind it. Like he would meet people, and regardless of who they were or what they looked like, it was a new interaction. And it
Mm.
was almost like this weird innocence. Now he had been, my dad was born in the 1920s, so he knows what it is, and in the South in the 1920s, so he knows what it is to be just flat out hated. And for him, he got double the hate because he was looked at as mixed. So white people didn't want anything to do with him, and because he was too dark,
Ugh.
and the African American community didn't want anything to do with him because he was too light.
Ugh.
He had beautiful hair. He definitely got the American Indian genes with his hair because he had this dark, silky, like I'm trying to think who the heck even has hair like that. The Rock is bald now, so I can't even turn to him. Like if Fabio was
Yeah.
this really great looking Cherokee Indian, yeah, that was my dad.
Nice.
So, but anyway, my point is what I do to handle these situations is I treat, especially during the course of my career, treat every interaction as new. Like I just assume that people are good people, and until I'm proven
Mm.
otherwise. And if I
Mm.
find out that they're not good people, to me it's never because of what they look like or where they're from.
Is that how
Like
you coach the police underneath you to have that same outlook when interacting with
yeah,
the public?
I have to tell you, I have almost an unfair advantage when it comes to my career and my perspective on law enforcement because the agency I work for we're pretty diverse. Our community's diverse. Um, we it's never been a thing. Like we watch the news, and
Nice.
when these things happen, we're just like, oh my gosh, not again.
Yeah.
Like it's just so frustrating. It's frustrating to watch because you know what the reactions are going to be on both sides, and you know this same argument's going to come up again, and this media back and forth, and the officials have to say things and all this stuff, and we just want to go out and do our job and protect the town.
Yeah.
Like that's all we want to do. We just want to go out, do our job, help people that need some help, catch some people that have done something wrong, that have robbed somebody or broken into somebody's house, catch them and pass them on to the justice system, and that's our role.
Hmm.
Like we really don't care what the person happens to look like when they do what they're doing. It's such a non-factor, and I've been fortunate that coming up when I got hired with one of my best friends from like third grade, and we came up through the ranks together. And I think I've worked with one, two, three, four people that I was actually in elementary school with that I wound up
That's so awesome.
honestly that I wound up being on the job with. So we have I sort of have an unfair advantage, like I said, with when it comes to my career because I never had to deal with that on a professional level. And
Do you think
you
that's
know,
because it's an isolated community, or do you think that as a culture that we're shifting, that more and more we're seeing people
I
are just accepting people for who they are and not applying a judgment to them?
I can only speak from my agency when I
Yeah.
say that where I work, if 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 flat out racism happened, someone would get punched in the mouth. It would not be when I tell you it would not be tolerated by anybody. They would be out. I mean, they
Hmm.
would be out. So like if we had somebody that we hired that was hiding or harboring those type of feelings, they better keep hiding it because if it came out, they would be ousted. I
Mm.
mean, they would be blackballed. probably the worst cliche I could use just there, but they would be completely, they would be completely ousted.
Right.
They would. It's just there's no patience for it. Something interesting happened because because of my role as a police officer. Like when you see all these things happening in the news, and back when Ferguson happened some years ago, it was a real issue, obviously, and nationally. And it's interesting to be in this career where something can happen thousands of miles away, but it's your responsibility to deal with it.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen when you're a doctor or you're an attorney or anything else. But it's part of the job, because people assume that if that's what you're like in South Central Los Angeles and they did something, then well, you're
That's
wearing a shiny badge and carrying a gun
yeah.
too, so
All
that must
police
be what
officers
you're
must
like.
be like that then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's funny. I said to I told my wife a while ago. I said, you know what? I'm a very patient person. I can pretty much tolerate anything. The only thing I can tolerate anything except intolerance. So I really I just don't have patience for hatred based on any
Yeah.
class or culture. Something interesting happened shortly after Ferguson. Our agency got a call from a community group that wanted to do an event at the high school in response to the national interest in how policing is being done in our country and the whole justice system. They wanted to have a panel where they were inviting judges, people from from the local courts, from probation. They wanted police officers there. They wanted all these some clergy and some pastors. So they had all these people on this panel that they wanted to be able to do like a big Q&A, sort of a town hall type of thing at the local high school. So at the time, I was a lieutenant, and my boss, the director of public safety, he gets a call, and he hears that they're doing an event. They wanted somebody to be representative of the agency. So he he calls my office, tells me about this phone call. I'm like, oh, it sounds like a great idea. And and then he says, yeah, well, I want you to be the representative of the agency. And I'm like, my mouth just dropped open, and I just thought, oh man, because and to put myself in check, because I had seen so much going on in the news. I'd seen so much anger being thrown at police officers. I assumed I was going to go into a hostile environment and I was just going to have to fend for myself, and hopefully would be able to get some points out about what we actually do and don't do. And because I expected to be attacked.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes to show we all have a responsibility to check ourselves, because we make so many assumptions, even innocent assumptions, and that one was mine. Because what wound up happening was I went to this event where I assumed that a lot of people were going to show up that were angry and want to attack the entire system. And instead, what happened was I'd never been thanked so much in my life for doing what I did for a living. It was insane.
Wow.
I had people approaching me left and right, shaking my hand and saying, they said, the stuff that we're seeing in the news, it really makes us angry. It is just, there's just no excusing it. And they had their, they had their anger about, the loss of life, and the really what was coming up was the history of our country, and the things that, even though things have been changed on so many real levels, it's still new. I mean, it's only been decades since the civil rights movement. It's not like it was 800 years ago.
Right.
This is in people's lifetimes that are alive now. So that's a reality that we have to understand. Everybody, all of us have to understand that this is still a young country that is moving from tolerance of some horrific injustices, and we are still in a time of growing pain. And
That's really well said. I'm from Canada, and it's such a different. I think I grew up in the area I grew up in. It was very multicultural, just like the area that you serve and protect. And so I really never experienced racism, not on the news, maybe I'm sheltered and naive, but we never saw. I just never saw. I grew up in North York, in Toronto, just in an area where I at times felt like a minority, and that was a good thing.
Yeah.
I just there were so many um wonderful different cultures coming together, and
Hmm.
like even our high school's newspaper was called the Mosaic because we just had so
Mm,
many people. Our
that's cool.
school had the best English as a second language program, and so we really that neighborhood really attracted people from all over.
Yeah.
And I just didn't see it. I didn't see it in the news. I didn't see it in my school. I didn't see it in my neighborhood. I didn't see it in my city. I mean, I'm sure it existed, but it
Yeah.
didn't, not anywhere near what I see it
Yeah.
in the United States. So moving here, it's such a culture shock because Canada and the United States on so many levels seems like the same country, but it's not. And these little
Yeah.
subtle differences like
Yep.
jolt me. And so when I came here and I've just felt the tension that I never felt in Canada. And
Yeah.
but the good news, I mean, I might be wrong on my dates, but I believe Canada eradicated slavery about 100 years before the United States. I mean, I could be
Oh,
wrong on
wow.
that, but it was something along those lines. And so it's possible that what happens in Canada is sort of a mirror representation of the
Hmm.
US may look like in one or two generations. Maybe we can look to that
Yeah.
and go, hey, this is, this, like there's light at the end of the tunnel where,
Yeah.
we can put this all behind us. um
Yep.
and I love what you say, that like look at whoever you come across, how like your father had that wonderful curiosity to want to get to know the
Yeah.
person inside, because I just believe that we were all souls that we didn't have a body, right, and we were born
Yeah.
into this body, and
Yep.
there behind those eyes there's a soul, and so we're all related on that level. Let's get to know the person.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. And it's funny because as an individual, like you talked about, um letting go of the past, letting go of the past, uh to, to victimize us, like our own personal past,
Hmm.
and accepting gratitude, or bringing in gratitude so that we can empower ourselves for the future. We can do that on an individual level,
Hmm.
but we can also see on a countrywide, on a national level,
Yeah.
that we
It-
can, as a nation, like,
yeah.
look, okay, the bad things happen, absolutely they happen, right, but it's the story, like you said, it's the story we apply to it, that
Hmm.
it's either that's going to empower us to change
Yeah.
and create a change that we want, or it's going to create more victimhood. And so I love that what you taught today could be applied on an individual level, on a community level. It seems so simple, but it is the most profound things I've heard.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying it. I definitely think it's funny because sometimes when people have these conversations, they say, well, it starts with the leadership, so it's going to have to come from, our president and the government and all those things. And then other people say, well, it's down to the individuals and the persons, and that's where change is going to have to come from. And I sit back and look, I'm like, people, it has to come from both. Like
Right?
it really does. Like the average person, mom and dad and the kids and the people that are living day to day, their day to day lives, they have to stop tolerating stereotyping and intolerance of other people because they're
Mm-hmm.
differences. It has to start there. And then again, also in the leadership at the top, it certainly has to happen there because that's where if there are flaws in the legal system that need to be changed or the justice system, that's where it has to happen. So everybody has to take. I don't care where you rely on the food chain when it comes to perceived authority. We're all responsible for it.
Yes,
So
every
like,
individual needs to take 100%
yeah,
responsibility.
and even me, like that was a lesson when I went to that town hall where I was expecting to have to, you know, really defend myself because of the uniform I was wearing. That was a lesson that day because I'm like, dummy, there you go, walking in, and you were assuming that these people were going to attack you because of what you do for a living. Like you were on the defensive. And it was really a lesson for me to remember that, like, look, you really have to enter every situation and just let the situation happen and then take responsibility for how you react to it. And that's what I normally do with interactions with people. But that situation had scared me into thinking and almost bracing for, this negative event, and it wound up being one of the most positive events I'd been to. I was giving hugs and shaking hands, and people are saying we're so, we appreciate how you guys do things here in this town, and we're grateful that we don't get that from you. So thank you for doing what you do. And I came home. I was like, I told my wife, I'm like, that was very unexpected. It was, and don't get me wrong, it's not that we normally have a lot of support from our community, but even at a time like that, when there was a lot of anger being let out, there's a lot of fear and a lot of emotions coming up. Even in those times, our community really stood behind us and thanked us, and it was really what I thought was going to be a really tough day turned into a really good one.
That's cool. I love it when that
Yeah,
happens. And that you could shift in the moment and go, "Oh, wow, I really
yeah,
put up my guard and I could have I could have created a different event, but or created a different, luckily that outcome happened the way it did, but it's interesting. It
hmm,
allowed you to see that you had that unconscious bias
yeah,
towards
yeah,
the public and how they would react. But you were kind of put on the spot to be all of a sudden be the PR person for a
yeah,
major
yeah,
event. So, but it was I love what you did was in the moment you gained positive learnings for yourself to take as a
yeah,
tool for the future. I have a feeling that that's
yeah,
why you're a really good coach is that you not only like you consume all these books, you're consuming all this information, you have a degree in this,
yeah,
but you also learn every day from your experiences and you look inward to go, how can I learn from this? And
hmm,
then you're applying that to your life. And then when you work with your clients, it sounds like what you do is you help them to have that same amount of awareness that maybe
yeah,
get stuff out of their blind spots so they too can have these growth in leaps and bounds. I wanted
yeah.
to bring up, I'll let you complete that thought and then I have something to bring up.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say, I'm sorry to cut you off. I was going to say I'm a bit of I'm lucky that in some ways I overanalyze. So in my coaching, I do a lot of asking. I really do. Like I can't even buy a TV without spending at least an hour and a half on like, Best Buy's website, reading reviews, and then trying to figure out, okay, is this person just, trying to give a negative review because they're one of those people, or did they really have a bad experience with this TV? Like
Mm-hmm.
I get overly involved in that process, but it definitely helps as a coach because as I'm sure like if you're really going to help somebody get somewhere, you got to ask questions, and you have to truly want to understand somebody's perspective, and that really goes to, we can bring that back to society. We have to really want to understand what the other person's perspective is if we're going to make progress.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I love
that's
it. Get in someone else's shoes. That's something that I
yep.
learned very early on that helped me really like navigate through life.
Hmm.
Is to get in someone else's shoes. I've even had these conversations with my husband where he'd be like, "Why did that person, do that or say that?" And I had to sit back and go, it's like sometimes people think so differently from us
Yes.
that I mean, okay, imagine you're a conservative trying to understand a liberal. Imagine
Yeah.
you're pro-life trying to like really understand pro-choice, or you're an anti-vaxxer trying to understand pro-vaxxer. Like a lot of
Yep.
times those people, and I think because the media really feeds off of polarizing the situation, I think politicians love polarizing the situation
Oh yeah.
because the two, it's a two, basically a two-party system is absolutely ridiculous. I mean just not that the United States is ridiculous, or I'm just saying it's ridiculous to have these topics. If you have two choices, it's not a choice, it's a dilemma. It's
Yes.
just it's always going to be a fight
Yeah.
instead of fostering understanding. But with
Hmm.
that fight, then it's like politicians, it's a popularity contest of who won the fight, who won the debate. And unfortunately, that is then mirrored in society. And so now we're pitting
Yeah.
against each other and fighting. I have friends who are hardcore liberals and friends that are hardcore conservative. I have friends that are both sides of every argument.
Yep.
And I know that there's people who would like end their Facebook friendship with me if they knew where I stood, with all these issues, simply
Yeah.
because I didn't agree with them, instead
Yep.
of creating understanding. And
Hmm.
it's really interesting. It's like, just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean I'm the
Oh
devil,
gosh.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Is that
but
so crazy?
yeah, exactly. But if we were to instead like put aside our ego, because like we always think, oh, what, like, we're our decision, like our like perspective on something is the right one, and
Yeah.
everything else is, the wrong way, right?
Yep.
The wrong way to do it, and so those people are
Yep.
wrong. But if we were to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and just try to wrap our brain or neurology around how they think, and come to like for example, if a store clerk is really mean to us,
Hmm.
um I'll say, that person, like look at their life, like maybe they're really like in pain, like look at their physiology,
Yeah.
look at their, like, could you understand that if they were in there a lot of pain, emotionally or physical pain, that they would have acted like that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes if we, like you said, like you talked about making up a new reason, right? So it's like, if someone's
Yeah.
mean to me, I'm not going to say they're mean to me because they suck and I'm awesome, or because maybe they're mean to me because I'm a woman, or they're sexist or they're racist or whatever. But instead, look to a meaning that would allow me to look at them as a human and not as this person that's being mean to me.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Look at them and go, well, maybe they're in pain, or maybe they're having a really bad day, or maybe someone they love is suffering, and that's why
Yeah.
they're lashing out.
Yep.
And so now we can also humanize people,
Hmm.
instead of come out as creating excuses that put us down. Now it's excuses that can have us, not excuses, but now we're making up meaning that is serving us, because now we're able to get into their shoes, or the potential shoes,
Yeah.
and start to
Yeah.
feel more human, start to feel a human connection. I think that's what we
Yes.
really want, is that human connection. You had said earlier on, you kind of rattled through a checklist of things that in the last 10 years you've really perfected. Um, One of them being looking inward instead of comparing yourself to others. So like, for example, why are you now so successful in the law enforcement? You stopped comparing yourself to others, and you started looking inward, like your own personal competition, instead of competing with others. Can you explain a bit about how to do that, how to shift our mindset so we do that?
Yeah, I think when I was talking earlier, I was talking about there's four things. I think no, it's not in my book. There's four the main things, or four the reasons I should say, that I've been able to achieve whatever level of success I've achieved so far, both in my professional life as in law enforcement, in my career here as a coach and a speaker and podcaster and now an author, and even in my marriage. What wound up happening over the years is I was learning a ton of lessons and just really geeking out with with a whole bunch of different. I'm a bit of a nerd, geeking out with a whole bunch of personal development books, reading about leadership, human behavior, all this stuff, and I wound up realizing I was looking for the patterns. I was looking for the
Hmm.
patterns that were consistently creating success, not just for me, but people I interacted with, people I've met um, as an interviewer on my own show, people I've met from other countries that I ran into, people that were really crushing it in life. What were they all doing consistently? And I really wanted to condense it to something small and simple, so that number one, selfishly speaking, so that I could use it regularly, and number two, so that I can turn it into something that I help others to achieve just by making a simple framework out of it. And it wound up being this thing that I called the four laws of pure success. And it sounds real cheesy, but the PURE is an acronym. The P is for what I call a pivotal choice. The U is for unconditionally high standards. The R is for reflective comparison, and the E is for elevating our situational response. And I'm just going to take 2 seconds to bang through each of these. The pivotal choice is what we talked about earlier, and that's taking 100% responsibility for your response to every single circumstance in your life. You have to take complete ownership. And we talked about the reasons why, that if people give themselves, people know there are times where we're allowed to give ourselves an out, and we don't have to be in control anymore, and we don't have to take responsibility for how we're going to react to something. By our very nature, we'll take the out. We're going to find an excuse. We're going to find the excuse. We're going to find a reason. That we're going to find a way to wedge our foot in the door and give ourselves an out, because we want to protect ourselves. We don't want to be wrong. We want to be able to just wing it. But I call it a pivotal choice for a very specific reason, because the people that claim and really hold on to, if you look at people that have gone through their lives and achieved some really great things, whether they're famous or not, the ones that have really been able to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish are the ones that took that responsibility, and they own it as part of their, not as a thing to do, but as a who they are. Like that's how they go through life, saying, okay, this is just me. Like I hold myself to this, that I take 100% responsibility for whatever happens, even if I don't like it, even if it wasn't quote unquote my fault. But people that don't make that choice, and they, just assume that some stuff just isn't up to them, their lives turn out very, very differently. And I've seen it countless times. So that's one of the first, and it's the most important skill that I've seen in decades of both careers, is that claiming responsibility. The second was unconditionally high standards. One of the first things I learned in this world of personal and professional growth was from Tony Robbins. I remember the first time I heard him say, if you want to change your life, you've got to change your standards. And I definitely think that it's true. Like the quality of our life, the quality of how we're living, and how our relationships go, and how our careers go, and how our health goes, the way we take care of ourselves, it really depends on the standards that we hold ourselves to.
Yes.
But what I noticed was that people can embrace that belief and say, I'm going to have high standards. I'm going to be great to my husband and wife, or I'm going to eat good, and I'm going to run more than I used to, and I'm going to do all these things, and I'm going to work harder, and I'm going to start this business. But a lot of times what winds up happening is we have these high standards until things hit the fan. And then when it hits the fan, those standards go out the window. I jokingly, but not jokingly, said I was doing an interview a couple of weeks ago. I said, you ever, just picture the husband that comes home or the wife that comes home from work, and their spouse made them their favorite dinner, and everything. The day was great, and the clothes are washed, and the house is clean, and the car was washed, and the kids made it to school and got back from school on time. And by the way, they packed the lunch for tomorrow, and everything's great. And because everything's great, when she came home from work, she's bragging about how great her husband was, and they just had a great night and watched a movie and all this beautiful stuff. But and a lot of times when things are okay, people will talk about how great they treated their husband, wife, spouse, or you can use you can use diet as an analogy and talk about how well you eat and all that kind of stuff. But here's what happens. What happens on the day you come home and the house is a mess, there's nothing to eat, and the kids, you forgot to pick the kids up from practice. And all of a sudden, that loving conversation is out of the window. Like, when things hit the fan, do you really keep the same standards? You know where I'm going with this. But when is the legacy created? It's how you act when you have an excuse not to act up to your standards. Like, nobody remembers how nice you were when everything was okay. Nobody remembers that you ate the salad when you were hanging out with your vegan friends. Nobody's impressed by you working out, because it was Saturday and you had nothing else to do, and your friend asked if you wanted to go to the gym with him. But, what matters is what we do in the moments when we don't think, or what we do in the moments when we think we have an excuse not to. Like, when we have the excuse to really just flip out on our better half because of something they did that we didn't like or something they forgot to do. Or, we have an excuse to skip on our diet or skip the workout. We have an excuse not to get the work done the way we should get it done because we're annoyed with our boss, so we're just going to blow off that part of the project. If we don't have unconditionally high standards, by default, it means that our standards are conditional, which means I'm only going to perform this well if. And that if is a problem, and that's where lives fall apart. Everybody's happy when they're on their first date. Well, not everybody, but most people, on the first date or their first few days, everybody gets along until somebody acts or does or says something that they don't quite agree with, and then things go downhill from there. So having unconditionally high standards, it makes all the difference. And that is look, I don't say it lightly as if it's something easy to do. That is a flat out practice. And that is a matter of intention. And I remember the first time I started learning this, I remember being in a disagreement, and on the tip of my tongue, I was going to say something that I shouldn't have said. And I remember pausing intentionally, thank God. And I paused and I breathed and I said to myself, I'm like, okay, Aaron, is this your standard? Is saying this response really who you want to be? And I didn't. It was one of the first times in my life that I didn't just allow myself to react instead of think. And there comes a moment, if we're lucky, we learn this as an intentional skill across all contexts of our life, and we apply it, because I can promise you, when you start thinking about who you are and what your values are, and how you think people should be treated, and how you think you should treat yourself, and how you should feed yourself, and how you should perform in your business or at your job, whatever those values are, they need to be things that are written down, and so that they're tangible, like a thing that you can actually see and say, okay, that's me, that's who I am, that's what's important to me. And then hold yourself to it exactly when you think you shouldn't have to. It will change your life, I promise you.
That is so awesome. Now, on your website, aaronkeithhawkins.com, you've got this section called Get Freebies. And I thought maybe there'd be one or two things, because it's freebies with an S. So there's like two things. But there's like a dozen things that you give away. Are one of these this list of the pure with the breakdown?
Yes. AaronKeithHawkins.com/success will get you this breakdown.
Great. So people can actually take it with them,
Yep.
download it, and start applying it to their life. You give them the full breakdown.
Absolutely.
Great.
It's about, I condensed it. It's probably about you'll read it faster than I can talk about it, because I gotta get all geeked out and excited about it.
Oh no, I'd love to have you back, and we can dive into
sure.
this. Like, that's what I want, the actionable steps that people can take and the mindset shifts. So we can definitely have you back on the show and dive deeper into this. I think that would be really cool. But I urge listeners to go to aaronkeithhawkins.com. That link is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast, and then click on freebies and check out all the different awesome freebies that you can download for free. You also have the podcast, which I definitely want to let listeners check out. Is that on iTunes as well as your website?
It is. Yes. Okay. You can either listen on my on my website at aaronkeithhawkins.com, or you can just go to iTunes, and you can either type Aaron Keith Hawkins or just type Unbreakable Success, and
nice.
You'll get to the show, and it's a lot of fun.
Cool. So if listeners loved your energy today, they're gonna definitely love your show. You got to come back on. I know you and I have been planning this episode for a while. I feel like the last 6 months, it's been since last November that we've been planning this. And so I hope to have you back on sooner than in 6 months. Definitely get you back on my schedule, because you have so much to share. And I think this information is so important, because we can throw all the herbs and the healthy food at someone to heal. But if their mindset, it really, and I know it sounds cliche, but it really does start with mindset. And my transformation, I transformed my life and my health, and it really did start with a decision. It started with a mindset, and of course, then taking all the actionable steps.
Yep.
But that is so important. And so applying what you teach in addition to all the health and lifestyle stuff that we were learning on all the other episodes, it's like a 1-2 punch for success. So thank you, Aaron, for so much for coming on the show and really
Oh, you're
laying the
welcome.
foundation for us. I think we've given the listeners a lot to contemplate and start to apply to their life today. And then I want to definitely have you back on the show to take this deeper.
Well, I love being here, and I have to thank you, number one, for having the show. Like this show as a resource for your listeners is absolutely amazing. So anybody listening to this, that if you are listening to this and you're not subscribed yet to Ashley's show, and please make sure you hit subscribe because you need more of this. And she's awesome, and she knows what she's talking about, and her guests are rock stars. And I'm just glad to be here and be part of this show. So all kidding aside, Ashley, I'm so grateful that you allowed me to come on and share this conversation with you. And I'd be flattered to come back anytime. And certainly thank you all for listening and hanging out with us today.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Let's make this a regular thing.
Awesome. Sounds good to me.
Do you feel like you're missing something? Are you searching for the right answers to solve your health issues? Do you feel like you should have more energy and mental clarity? With everything you're doing for your health, you may be missing one key component. Our body needs 90 essential nutrients every day to function optimally. Because of the farming practices over the last 100 years, most of our food has 60% fewer vitamins and minerals compared to just 50 years ago. So if you aren't eating 8 cups of a variety of fruits and vegetables each day, you may be missing some of your essential nutrients. These are the raw building blocks the body needs to create new healthy tissue, healthy hormones, balanced digestive system, strong muscles, bones and joints, and maintain an optimal functioning nervous system. Especially if you're experiencing more stress or if you've gone through an illness like an infection, that takes more resources. So if you're not consuming more vitamin C and more of all the 16 vitamins and all the 60 minerals when you're going through more stress, either physical stress, emotional stress, mental stress, those stressors take more nutrients to kind of survive those bumps in the road in life. And over time, that whittles away, that kind of depletes our nutrient tanks, our stores in our body. Without these 90 essential nutrients, things start to break down. Now, you've experienced these breakdowns. Maybe you get migraines, maybe you're exhausted, maybe your hormones are out of balance, your digestion's out of balance, or you have some aches and pains. Maybe you've even been diagnosed with something. You have a series of symptoms, and if those symptoms all look like something, then we can diagnose it, right? That's what MDs can do. MDs will treat these breakdowns with drugs and mask your symptoms. But if your body has a nutrient deficiency, no amount of drugs will fix the problem. 7 years ago, I embarked on a journey to cure my diabetes, infertility, PCOS, high blood pressure, and chronic adrenal fatigue. I felt like I was a mess. Through my research, I found a company that made natural supplements to address these nutrient needs. They formulated their supplements to exceed all standards of quality. Their minerals are the most bioavailable and absorbed by the body that I have ever found. After getting on their protocols for healthy hormones and blood sugar, along with their dietary recommendations for better health, I reversed my type 2 diabetes, I reversed my infertility, I no longer had high blood pressure, my energy and vitality came back, and after 6 years of trying to get pregnant with my husband before we found these supplements, once we got on these supplements, we were able to conceive our wonderful healthy son, who's now 3 years old, and he is amazing, and we would have never had that had we not found this company. Speaking of our son, he's also taking these supplements for optimal health. His pediatrician thinks they're amazing. If you'd like to give these supplements a try and see for yourself if you're experiencing a nutrient deficiency, please go to takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Their health coaches are phenomenal. I personally know all of them. They're amazing people. And I just want you to know, as my listener, I really I feel like I need to protect my listeners. I would never promote anything that I didn't 100% believe in and I didn't feel was healthy or good for you. I feel like you're my tribe and I'm sharing this information. In fact, for the last 2 years, the only reason why I've been doing this podcast is so that I can help as many people as possible gain their health back. And so the health coaches at takeyoursupplements.com, I really trust that they will make sure that you're well taken care of. They will work with you to help determine the best protocol for your nutrient needs and work within your budget. They will also help to implement a holistic protocol that includes supporting a healthy diet and lifestyle. Go to takeyoursupplements.com, fill out the form, and one of their health coaches will get back to you really shortly. And then you guys can schedule a time to talk on the phone and they will work with you to help you dial in all your nutrient needs. I really look forward to hearing about your experience with them. Please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me in our Facebook group. Go to Facebook, search Learn True Health, and join our group. Let me know what you think about the wonderful health coaches at takeyoursupplements.com. And by the way, when you go to takeyoursupplements.com and you get assigned to a health coach, they're your health coach. You're not going to keep getting a different person every time. You get one person and they work with you and they hold your hand for months down the road. They're there for you to support you month after month while you're on your nutrient protocol, and they're helping you dial in your nutrient needs. They're really wonderful like that. So I know you'll enjoy your experience with them, and I'd love to hear about your experience with them. Please feel free to, you can email me as well, ashley@learntruehealth.com. I love hearing success stories. Like I said, I've been working with a supplement company for my own health for the last 7 years, and I've reversed so many issues. I love sharing this information because I think that many of you will be able to resolve your issues with nutrition, just like I've seen many people do. With that said, go to takeyoursupplements.com, fill out your information, and a health coach is very excited to start working with you and helping you get your health back.